the Overtoun Bridge, where dogs jump to their deaths. In the village of Milton, near Dumbarton in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, there stands a beautiful Victorian bridge. Built in 1895, the Overtoun Bridge is an architectural marvel, a Gothic stone structure with ornate parapets, spanning a steep gorge where the Overtoun Burn flows 50 feet below. The bridge leads to Overtoun House, a magnificent Scottish baronial manor surrounded by lush forest and walking trails. On any given day, you might see families strolling across, admiring the view, enjoying the Scottish countryside. But there's something wrong with this bridge, something that has been happening since the 1960s, something that has earned it a sinister nickname, the Dog Suicide Bridge. Since the 1960s, at least 300 dogs have jumped from this bridge. At least 50 have died from the fall onto the jagged rocks below. And here's what makes it truly disturbing. The dogs always jump from the same spot, between the last two parapets on the right side. They always jump on clear, sunny days. And many of the dogs that survive, when brought back to the bridge, attempt to jump again. This is the true story of Overtoun Bridge, one of the strangest and most disturbing unsolved mysteries in the animal world. To understand why Overtoun Bridge became infamous, we need to go back to when people first started noticing the pattern. It wasn't a single dramatic incident that drew attention. It was the accumulation of tragedies over decades, stories whispered among local dog walkers, warnings passed from one pet owner to another. Don't walk your dog across Overtoun Bridge. Something happens there, something they can't explain. The earliest documented cases date to the 1960s, though locals suggest the phenomenon may have begun even earlier. A dog would be walking calmly with its owner, apparently content, when suddenly, without warning, it would bolt toward the edge of the bridge and leap over the parapet. Nos. Hesitation. No pause. Just a sudden, inexplicable compulsion to jump. Witnesses describe a chilling consistency to these incidents. The dogs don't slip or lose their footing. They don't appear to be chasing something visible. They simply run deliberately toward a specific section of the bridge and leap. Owners described the moments before as surreal. Their dog would suddenly freeze, as if sensing something. Sometimes the dog would stare at a particular spot, fixated on something invisible. Other times, the dog would become agitated, anxious, pacing. Then, without warning, it would bolt and jump. The breeds most affected tend to be long-nosed dogs, breeds known for strong senses of smell. Collies, Labradors, Golden Retrievers, German Shepherds. These are intelligent breeds, not prone to irrational behavior. Yet, at Overtoun Bridge, they behave in ways their owners have never seen before and never see again. The deaths are tragic enough, but what makes the mystery even more disturbing are the survivors, dogs that manage to land in water or on softer ground, that limp away with broken legs or other injuries, that are rescued and nursed back to health, often show signs of trauma. They become anxious, jumpy, sometimes refusing to go near any bridge. But in multiple documented cases, when these same dogs are brought back to Overtoun Bridge, even months or years later, they attempt to jump again. It's as if whatever drew them to that spot the first time continues to exert its pull. One particularly haunting case involved a golden retriever named Hendrix. In 2014, the dog was walking with his owner when he suddenly bolted and jumped from the bridge. Miraculously, he survived the 50-foot fall, though badly injured. After weeks of recovery, Hendrix seemed to return to his normal self. But several months later, his owner, perhaps unwisely, decided to walk across Overtoun Bridge again. The moment Hendricks reached that same spot, he tried to jump again. His owner barely managed to hold him back, describing the dog as if possessed, straining toward the edge with a strength and determination that seemed inhuman. By the 2000s and early 2000s, the phenomenon had attracted significant media attention. Newspapers ran stories about the dog suicide bridge. Television documentaries investigated the mystery. The internet, always hungry for the strange and unexplained, seized on the story. And with increased attention came increased scrutiny. Was this real? Were dogs really jumping to their deaths in such large numbers? Or was this an urban legend that had grown with the telling? The numbers themselves are disputed. Some sources claim 600 dogs have jumped. Others say 300. Still others suggest these numbers are exaggerated, that the actual incidents are far fewer. Part of the problem is that there's no official record keeping for dog incidents at the bridge. The deaths and jumps have been documented through newspaper reports, witness accounts, and local veterinary records, but there's no comprehensive database. A veterinarian from the nearest clinic to Overtoun Bridge, who worked there for over 2 decades, could only recall 2 cases that came to her attention. This has led some skeptics to suggest the phenomenon is largely mythological, a scary story that grew with each retelling. But even the skeptics acknowledge that multiple dogs have definitely jumped from this bridge. The question isn't whether it happens. The question is why and how often. In 2005, the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals decided to investigate. They sent representatives to examine the bridge, to walk it themselves, to try to understand what might be causing dogs to jump. What happened next only deepened the mystery. One of the investigators, while standing on the bridge, reported a sudden, overwhelming urge to jump. It came out of nowhere, a compulsion that frightened him so much that the investigation was immediately suspended. Was this psychological suggestion, knowing the bridge's reputation, manifesting as a physical sensation? Or was there something about the bridge itself, something that affects certain individuals, human and canine, in inexplicable ways? The SPCA, shaken but determined, brought in Dr. David Sands, a renowned animal behaviorist and canine psychologist. Sands approached the mystery scientifically. He examined the bridge from multiple angles, literally and figuratively. He studied the architecture, the surrounding environment, the sounds, the sights, everything a dog would experience while crossing. His investigation revealed several interesting factors. First, the geography. Overtoun Bridge spans a deep gorge, the Overtoun Burn far below. The bridge has solid stone parapets, 18 inches thick, which means a dog walking across can't see down to the gorge below. From a dog's perspective, the bridge might appear to continue as a solid surface. The tapered edges of the parapets could create an optical illusion, making the drop look like a continuation of the path rather than a 50-foot fall onto rocks. Second, the sensory environment. Scotland is home to several species of strong-smelling animals, including mink, pine martens, and various small mammals. Mink in particular were introduced to Scotland in the 1950s, which roughly corresponds to when the jumping phenomenon began to be noticed. Male mink urine has an extraordinarily pungent odor, similar to skunks. Dogs have a sense of smell thousands of times more sensitive than humans. A scent that we might not notice at all could be overwhelming to a dog. Sands conducted an experiment. He exposed 10 dogs to 3 different scents: mouse, squirrel, and mink. 7 of the 10 dogs immediately and dramatically went for the mink scent, showing intense interest bordering on obsession. This suggested that if mink were present in the gorge below Overtoun Bridge, their scent rising up through the open space could be incredibly attractive to certain dogs, particularly those breeds with the strongest olfactory abilities. Sands's theory: long-nosed breeds catch the intense scent of mink coming from the gorge below. The scent is so overwhelming, so interesting, that it captures their complete attention. In their eagerness to investigate, they jump up onto the parapet, intending to look over or sniff more closely. But because the parapet is solid and they can't see the drop, and because they're in a state of excited sensory overload, they misjudge and leap, thinking they're jumping onto more solid ground rather than into a 50-foot void. This theory explains several aspects of the mystery. It explains why long-nosed, scent-driven breeds are most affected. It explains why jumps happen more frequently on clear, sunny days, when thermal currents would carry scents upward more effectively. It explains why the jumps always happen at the same spot, presumably where the scent is strongest or where the bridge architecture creates the most effective illusion of solidity. But does it explain everything? This is where the mystery persists. Some aspects of the phenomenon don't quite fit the scent theory. The fixation some dogs show before jumping, staring at a specific spot as if seeing something. The way survivors often try to jump again when returned to the bridge, even if presumably the scent would be different on a different day. The sheer consistency of the behavior across decades and hundreds of individual dogs. And there's another factor that complicates any neat scientific explanation: the human incident. In October 1994, something happened at Overtoun Bridge that cast a dark shadow over an already disturbing place. Kevin Moy, a 32-year-old man, walked onto Overtoun Bridge carrying his 2-week-old son, Yohan. What happened next was horrific. Moy, in the grip of what would later be diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenia, believed his infant son was the Antichrist. Standing on the bridge between those same two parapets where dogs would later jump with such disturbing regularity, Moy threw his baby son over the edge onto the rocks 50 feet below. The baby didn't die immediately. He was rushed to the hospital, but died the following day from his injuries. Moy attempted to follow his son over the edge, but was stopped by his wife. He then tried to kill himself by slashing his wrists. He was restrained, eventually arrested, and stood trial for murder. The jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. During his trial and interviews, Moy explained why he chose Overtoun Bridge. He believed the location had special significance. He spoke of dark spirits, of ancient druids who had used the area for rituals, of supernatural forces that made the bridge a gateway between worlds. Whether these beliefs preceded his mental break or were symptoms of his illness is unclear. But the fact remains: he specifically chose Overtoun Bridge for this terrible act because he believed it had paranormal significance. This incident gave new fuel to those who believed the bridge was haunted or cursed. Local legends already whispered of the White Lady of Overtoun, a ghostly woman in pale mourning clothes, supposedly the spirit of a widow who had lived in Overtoun House. Some claimed to see her drifting across the grounds on misty days, or standing on the bridge, visible only from the corner of one's eye. After the Moy incident, some began to suggest the White Lady was luring both dogs and troubled humans to their deaths. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that Overtoun Bridge has an atmosphere. Many visitors report feeling uneasy there, even those who know nothing of its reputation. Some describe a feeling of being watched. Others report sudden anxiety or sadness for no apparent reason. A woman named Jenna, walking the bridge for the first time, described feeling as if the air got thinner and her stomach dropped, like missing a step on stairs. On a second visit, she felt overwhelming dread, a conviction that something bad was going to happen. When she later learned that several dogs had jumped that same weekend, she never returned. Are these feelings evidence of something paranormal, or are they psychological responses to a place with a tragic reputation? When you know a bridge is called the dog suicide bridge, when you know babies have been thrown from it, when you've heard the stories of hundreds of animals leaping to their deaths, is it any wonder you might feel unsettled walking across it? The rational explanation, the one most scientists accept, is Dr. Sands's scent theory, possibly combined with the architectural illusion. Dogs smell mink, become fixated, jump up to investigate, misjudge the drop. Add in the specific characteristics of certain breeds, the particular weather conditions that concentrate scent, and the consistent architecture of the bridge, and you have a recipe for a recurring phenomenon that, while tragic, is explainable through biology and physics. But this explanation, while logical, leaves some questions unanswered. Why do some humans report feeling compelled to jump? Why do survivors often try again? Why did the phenomenon apparently begin only in the 1960s if it's purely about scent and architecture? The bridge was built in 1895. Surely dogs walked across it for decades before 1960. Why didn't they jump then? One possible answer: mink. If mink were only introduced to the area in the 1950s, that could explain why the jumping began around that time. But mink have been documented in Scotland since the 1920s, escaped from fur farms or deliberately released. The timeline doesn't quite match. Another theory focuses on changes in dog ownership patterns. Perhaps the breeds most susceptible to the scent illusion, the long-nosed, highly scent-driven breeds, only became popular walking companions in Scotland in the post-World War II era. Perhaps earlier, walkers had different breeds, less likely to be affected. Or perhaps the mystery is simply that we're pattern-seeking creatures. Dozens of bridges span gorges and streams throughout Scotland. Dogs have undoubtedly jumped or fallen from many of them over the years. But Overtoun Bridge, because of its proximity to Dumbarton, because of the Gothic architecture that makes it memorable, because one or two incidents early on created a narrative that then attracted attention to subsequent incidents, became the focus of a story that wouldn't have formed around a less distinctive location. Local authorities, concerned about the continuing incidents and the bridge's dark reputation, eventually erected warning signs. The signs urge dog walkers to keep their pets on leashes when crossing Overtoun Bridge. Some local residents avoid the bridge entirely when walking their dogs, taking longer routes to bypass it. The warnings have helped somewhat. The rate of incidents does seem to have decreased in recent years, though whether that's due to the signs, changing walking patterns, natural variation in mink populations, or simply that fewer people are willing to risk walking their dogs there is unclear. But the mystery endures. Type Overtoun Bridge into any search engine and you'll find hundreds of articles, videos, documentaries, all trying to explain what happens there. Paranormal investigators have conducted overnight vigils. Psychics have claimed to sense trapped spirits. Scientists have analyzed every angle. And still, occasionally, a dog jumps. What makes Overtoun Bridge so captivating isn't just the tragedy of the dogs who died there. It's the intersection of the explainable and the inexplicable, the known and the unknown. We want to believe Dr. Sands' theory because it makes sense, because it grounds this disturbing phenomenon in biology and architecture and scent, things we can measure and understand. But there's a part of us, the part that shivers when walking through dark forests or old buildings, that wonders if there's more to it. That wonders if some places simply carry darkness, attracting tragedy in ways we can't quite explain. The people of Dumbarton are, by their own admission, superstitious. They grow up with stories of ghosts and spirits, of ancient druids who practiced dark rituals in the forests, of thin places where the boundary between our world and others grows permeable. To them, Overtoun Bridge is one of those thin places, a location where something is fundamentally wrong, where the normal rules don't quite apply. A local taxi driver, Alistair Dutton, put it simply: "We grew up playing in the Overtoun grounds, and we believe in ghosts here because we've all seen or felt spirits up here." For residents like Dutton, the mystery isn't why dogs jump. The mystery is why anyone would expect them not to, given what the bridge is. But belief in the supernatural doesn't negate the science. It's possible for both to be true, in a sense. Perhaps the mink scent does attract dogs to the edge. Perhaps the architecture does create an illusion. And perhaps, for reasons we don't understand, some locations accumulate tragedy, creating atmospheres that affect sensitive individuals, human and animal, in ways that science hasn't yet learned to measure. What we know for certain is this: Overtoun Bridge exists. It spans a gorge in Scotland. For over 60 years, dogs have jumped from it with disturbing regularity. Some die, some survive, some try to jump again. The pattern is real, even if the explanation remains incomplete. Today, if you visit Overtoun Bridge, you'll find it largely unchanged from its Victorian origins. The stone parapet still stands solid and imposing. The gorge still drops 50 feet to the Overtoun burn below. The forest still surrounds the estate, dense and green and beautiful. On a clear day, it's easy to see why this is a popular walking spot. The views are magnificent. The architecture is stunning. The countryside is quintessentially Scottish. But if you bring a dog, particularly a long-nosed breed, particularly on a sunny day, you might notice something. Your dog might pause at a certain spot between those last two parapets. It might sniff the air intently. It might stare at something you can't see. And in that moment, you might understand why this bridge has earned its dark reputation. You might feel what so many others have felt, that sense of something not quite right, something lurking just beyond the edge of perception. And you might quicken your pace, tighten the leash, and hurry across to the other side, relieved when you reach solid ground again, away from whatever it is that haunts Overtoun Bridge. The mystery continues. The debate between scientific explanation and supernatural speculation goes on. Dog owners remain wary. Researchers continue to study. And occasionally, despite all the warnings, despite all the precautions, a dog jumps. Why? We may never know for certain. Science offers its theories. Folklore offers its ghosts. The truth, as with so many mysteries, probably lies somewhere between the two, in a place where scent and sound and architecture and atmosphere and history and tragedy all combine to create something that defies simple explanation. Overtoun Bridge stands as a reminder that the world still holds mysteries, that not everything can be neatly explained, that sometimes places carry echoes of darkness that persist long after the original cause has been forgotten or explained away. The dogs that jumped, that died, that survived and jumped again, they can't tell us what they experienced. We can only observe, theorize, and wonder. And perhaps that's fitting. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries, questions without definitive answers, strange occurrences that remind us how little we truly understand about the world we inhabit, about the senses and perceptions of the creatures we share it with, about the thin line between the rational and the inexplicable. The Overtoun Bridge, the dog suicide bridge, a beautiful Victorian structure spanning a Scottish gorge, a place where, for reasons we still don't fully understand, hundreds of dogs have been drawn to leap into the void. A place where science and superstition meet, where the explained and unexplained overlap, where tragedy has played out again and again in the same location, in the same way, for over 60 years. It's still there if you want to visit. Just be careful, and if you bring a dog, keep it on a leash, because at Overtoun Bridge, something happens. Something we can theorize about, something we can study and analyze and debate, but something we still, after all these years, don't fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how it should be. Some places carry mysteries, some questions don't have easy answers, and some stories, like the story of Overtoun Bridge and the dogs who jumped there, remain quietly, disturbingly strange.